Okay, guys. So last time in the introduction to this to quadratics, we talked about how quadratics are used to model an object as its height versus time. So how gravity force affects an object, and how we can kind of find its distance based on time that an object's in the air for. Okay, so right now we really just talked about a dropped object, right? So we dropped an object from the Empire State Building, and we could kind of use the quadratic to measure the distance at any time we wanted to. So now I told you guys that after 6 seconds I was totally bored. So I was really bored, and so I stopped measuring. Now the question, of course, probably a lot of you had, I know that I still have it, but I was of course too bored to figure it out, is when would it hit the ground? Right? I mean, isn't that kind of, how long is it in the air for? I'm kind of really curious. How long would this thing be in the air for? So I'm not sure. Like, I really don't know. I don't know how long it'd be in the air for. It seems like when we looked at the last one, so it started at 1250, and I want to say it went to, maybe it was about 800 feet. So that was over 6 seconds, wasn't it? Maybe, I don't remember exactly. Maybe about 6 seconds. So maybe it wasn't 800. Maybe it was like closer to 700 feet. So maybe it would take 10. Maybe, right? Maybe 10 seconds is about right. I don't know. So maybe we could guess it, but we should be able to use quadratics, since we should be able to use quadratics to kind of figure that out. Now, people have actually made formulas to actually figure this out. And what we're going to do is we're going to kind of go through, we have to kind of build some math up before we can figure out that, because that math's kind of pretty complicated, but it's not that bad. So in order to do it, we have to kind of learn how to solve quadratic equations. And so in order to do that, we're going to do that. We're going to learn how to solve quadratic equations. And quadratic equations are actually really easy to solve. They look hard, but they're not. They're really super easy to solve. And I'm going to show you why I say that. So let's say, let's just talk about the most basic idea of solving a quadratic. We're going to start with a really basic problem. So let's call this a level 0 problem. So if we were, right, this is the most basic type of problem. So it's a level 0. So let's say, and this is a quadratic, I'm going to say x squared equals 100. By the way, a quadratic is always of the form, I keep on using this word quadratic, and we've talked about it a bit, but just a quick reminder. Anything of the form ax squared plus bx plus c is a quadratic, and this is a quadratic. The key here is that in this case, a is 1, b is 0, c is 0. So this is a quadratic. As long as a is not 1, we're good to go. So this is absolutely a quadratic. So it's just a very basic quadratic where we only have the first term squared. So what is this value? Well, I need some number that's squared equals 100. Well, hopefully you guys know that. That is 10. But it also could be, right? It could be negative 10. Because 10 times 10 is 100, but also negative 10 times negative 10 is 100. So, in other words, we get two answers. Let's look at another one. So, how about x squared equals 49? Well, that means something squared equals 49. So what must that be? Well, that's going to be x equals 7 or x equals negative 7. Okay, well, let's try another one. So how about x squared equals, let's do 64. So why don't you guys do it? You can pause the video real quick and see what you get. Hopefully what you got was x. So something squared equals 64, that means that squared thing has to be either 8 or negative 8. So those were, I hope you agree, those are really easy. And guess what? That's the idea behind all of them. It does get harder. I won't say it doesn't get harder, but that's the idea behind all of them. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to make it just slightly harder. We're not going to go crazy. We're not going to go crazy here, but let's do this. So I'm going to call these, instead of level 0, let's call these level 1. We're going to make them a little harder. So I'm going to say x plus 1 squared equals 100. That seems, at first glance, right, that seems a lot harder. That's a very different problem. But not really. Let's think about what we're saying again. I'm saying, right, I'm saying something, so let's kind of cross this out for a second. I'm saying something, right? Something squared equals 100. So if we kind of go through the logic that we did last time, well, if something squared equals 100, then that thing has to be either 10 or negative 10. Well, what was the thing that was being squared? Well, oops, I don't know why I'm doing that. I will undo it, but then I'll put it back. So what was that thing? Well, that must mean that x plus 1 equals 10 or negative 10. And if I want to solve for xy, I just subtract 1 from everything. And that gives me x equals 9 or negative 11. Well, that was pretty easy. Let's try another one. So how about x minus 4 quantity squared equals, how about 64? Well, what do we get? Well, this is telling me that something squared equals 64. So that something squared must be either, so what is it? It must be, so if something squared equals 64, then that thing must be either 8 or negative 8. And what is that thing? Well, that must be, x minus 4 must be 8 or negative 8. So in other words, solving for x, I'm going to add 4 to everything. And I get x equals 12 or negative 4. Let's do another one. How about x plus 5. Sorry, my handwriting is getting really messy here. X plus 5 squared equals 121. Why don't you guys try it yourself? Okay, so let's see what we get. So I got something squared equals 121, which means that thing must equal 11 or negative 11. What was that thing? Well, that thing was x plus 5. And subtracting 5 from both things, I get x equals 6 or negative 16. Okay, that's cool. That's cool. I'm going to give you a hard one. Let's go crazy with this one. Let's take this one just crazy. So I'm going to say x minus 7 squared equals 6. Well, that's kind of interesting, right? That's kind of different. Because right before, what we were doing was we were saying what number squared equals 121. Well, there is no number squared that gives you that, right? There's no number squared that equals 6. But so what, right? That means our values are going to be either the square root of 6 or the negative square root of 6, right? Which means that x minus 7 has to be equal to either the square root of 6 or negative 6. And now I'm going to add 7 to everything. And what do I get? Well, I get x equals 7 plus root 6 or 7 minus root 6. What does that equal? I don't know. It's irrational. I can estimate, but I don't know. Who knows, right? Does not matter. Okay, so those are level 0 and level 1 problems. In the next video, we're going to go and try some harder ones.